Hi everyone. Our names are John Grant and Shawnee Stacy, and we have always been passionate about serving our communities and finding innovative solutions to community-wide problems. One of these is learning ways that we can breach the digital divide and help patrons in need gain access to technology and digital literacy skills. Um, we're typically like for me personally, I'm typically most interested in this in terms of the difference between urban and rural communities and access to internet and technology. But one population that really does go unnoticed in discussions of the digital divide is our unhoused and low income populations, even those who live in urban settings. And I'm really, really grateful that John brought this up as a potential problem to address through community leadership, as I've also grown passionate about serving unhoused and low income communities as well. Before we get too far into our presentation though, here are some definitions of some terms that will pop up today in our discussion. According to Oxford Reference, the digital divide is the differential access to computers, information, the internet, and telecommunications globally, regionally, and locally, or excuse me, nationally and locally, that also comprises unequal access to job opportunities, resources, and training. The digital divide also contributes to another sociological concept known as the information rich and the information poor. Oxford research a reference again conceptualizes this, stating that it is the division of the general public into two groups depending upon the way in which they use and relate to information. Those who are, quote, information rich tend to also be in upper economic or socioeconomic classes, whereas those who are, quote, information poor tend to be in lower socioeconomic classes. This factors into the concept of haves and have-nots as well. Those who have are those who have ready access to resources, and those who have not do not. Access to technology requires monetary resources, which are like cell phones, computers, internet, and electricity. Those all cost money, and some are also tied to needing a permanent residence, such as internet and electricity, to access reliably. In terms of information and digital literacy skills, the American Library Association says that information literacy skills are the skills needed to, quote, recognize when information is needed and have the ability to locate, evaluate, and use effectively the needed information. This includes both research and thinking critically about the research. Like information literacy skills, digital literacy skills require needing to know where and how to access and use information, but also the ability to use information and communication technologies to find, evaluate, create, and communicate information, requiring both cognitive and technical skills.
The digital divide is not something new. It's been with us for decades. But how that gap is formed has shifted. In the beginning, it was more of a logistics thing. Some places simply didn't have the infrastructure to support the emerging technology. This affected rural areas more than urban. For instance, in 1996, we moved to a very small town in North Dakota. The only internet access was dial up. There was absolutely no cell phone service within 100 miles. It stayed that way for about 6 years. Eventually, cable made its way out and we had high speed internet. Verizon finally came out and put cell phone antennas around the town's water tower, and we had very limited cell service. Today, the shape of that divide is different. For the most part, we are not limited by infrastructure or the lack of it. Today, the divide is shaped more by socioeconomic characteristics. So, what is the digital divide? Next slide. The digital divide is the gap between those who have affordable access, skills, and support to effectively engage online and those who do not. As technology consistently evolves, the digital divide prevents equal participation and opportunity in all parts of life, disproportionately affecting people of color, Indigenous people, households with low income, people with disabilities, people in rural areas, and older adults. There's a couple things to point out here. The divide is not just about access, it's also about the skill necessary to navigate the internet. Like most libraries where I work, we have a bunch of computers for anybody to use. I can't count the number of times someone comes up to the desk and asks to use the computer for something. So we give them a guest pass and point them in the right direction. But they still kind of stand there and look at us. And finally they say, but I don't know how to use it. It could be they needed to print out an airline ticket or fill out a form or just write something in a Word document. They had access, but not the skills. I was once helping someone and I told them to open a new tab in their browser. They looked at me and said, I don't know how to do that. Education and training will be needed to narrow the divide. Next slide. Here's some quick facts about the digital divide. According to Pew Research, 7% of Americans do not use the internet. That may not seem like a lot of people. It seems like a small number, but it's approximately 23 million people. That's more than twice the population of North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico combined. Additionally, 23% of Americans do not have access to broadband connections at home. That's over 76 million people. And with the code behind today's web pages becoming more and more and more intricate and complex, regular dial-up simply cannot handle it. More and more broadband is essential to navigate the internet, especially if a child is learning remotely. So what's keeping people away? Next slide. Some people are simply opting out for a variety of reasons. Again, the library where I work has a telephone reference line for the entire district. The majority of the calls we get are from people looking for some sort of information, but they don't have the internet. We have one patron in particular who seems to call at least once a day, asking us to look up information about a person or an organization or simply for a weather forecast. The unique thing about her is she says she can't get online because she has a rare medical condition that prevents her from using the internet. We're still not sure what to make about that. Some of the other reasons people are opting out or they believe it's dangerous. I've had a number of patrons tell me they don't want to be online or have any sort of digital presence because someone might steal their information. And that could be true. Some people are afraid of being spied on. Some people just don't think they're missing out on anything. They don't need it. They get all they need from the newspapers, local news, DVDs, whatever. And some say it's too expensive. When finances are limited, they view the internet more of a luxury they don't necessarily need. And some say it's just too complicated or confusing. Back to that skills aspect of the divide. Next slide. So who are these people who are on the apparent right side of the divide? Those with access. Well, age makes a big difference. 43% of seniors, adults over 60, are not online. Many seniors don't see the need for it, or again, they're intimidated by that technology. But it's the underserved who are the most underrepresented. 23% of African American households are connected. That means that 77% are not. 23.6 Latino families are also connected. 50.8% of Asian Americans are also connected. Next slide. Economics makes a big difference as well. 77.7% of households with incomes above $75,000 were connected. 60.9% earning between $50,000 and $74,000 had internet. Only 46% earning between $35,000 and $49,000 had internet. Clearly, economic status makes a difference in who has access and who doesn't. Next slide. And some of the consequences of this divide of not having internet access are deepening divides and inequality. For instance, if an organization only lists job opportunities and openings online, only those that have access can find those jobs. Or if they only take applications online, only those that have access can apply. It creates barriers to economic opportunity, contributes to many socioeconomic inequalities, such as access to healthcare, educational opportunities, and again, jobs. And nowhere are these inequalities and barriers felt more than with the homeless. Next slide. According to HUD, 1 in 588 Americans are unhoused. And on any given night, approximately 195,000 people will sleep on the streets. That's not counting shelters. Next slide. And homelessness is not always what it seems. According to Ryan Dowd, who works with the unhoused and with libraries working with the unhoused, we only see about 10% of the unhoused. That's because only 10% of the homeless people are homeless for a year or longer, chronically homeless. The other 90% generally don't fit the stereotype of what we think homeless people look like. Additionally, 1 in 4 homeless people are employed. For instance, my wife works with someone who is homeless. It took her quite a while to figure that out. She didn't look like she was homeless. She had a job, making a fair wage. Her partner was receiving veterans assistance, yet they were still living in a van. She didn't fit what we think homeless people look like. Next slide. Here's some of the demographics. There are more males than females that are homeless, although this gap is narrowing, as well as an increase in families that are homeless. 40% of homeless adults served in the military. 22% suffer mental illness. 34% experience addiction disorders. 50% are African American. 35% are Caucasian. 12% are Hispanic. 2% are Native American, and only 1% are Asian. 25.3% of urban homeless are children under 18. Oh, next slide. And here's a surprising thing. 4% are unaccompanied minors. And next slide. So what about the homeless and the digital divide? Pew Research reports that 1 in 3 people who are unhoused report no internet usage over a 3-month period. It's 5 times the rate of population at large. This would seem to put them at a distinct disadvantage to those who do have access. Again, I work in a downtown. Another factor is how computers are used. I work in a downtown public library with a large homeless population. We got to get a large group of them in our library on any given day, many using our computers, which is great. But I have to say that for the most part, they are used for entertainment, games, YouTube, etc. Next slide. Because libraries champion the idea of equitable access to information for everyone, because libraries offer computer online access to everyone, libraries are in a unique position to help close the digital divide. More work needs to be done in developing internet skills, but with the right leadership, we believe the gap can be closed.
We think that one framework in which libraries can use to tackle this issue is through the concept of grassroots leadership. As we recall, grassroots leadership is defined by Marcus Kynan as networks of activists and organizations generating novel, bottom-up solutions for sustainable development, solutions that respond to the local situation and the interests of the communities involved. Community itself is the forefront of this leadership style, and membership, influence, excuse me. And community is defined by four dimensions: membership, influence, reinforcement, and shared emotional connection. Membership means people feel like they belong to a group. Influence means members feel as if they are able to make a difference in their community. Reinforcement refers to the community itself meeting its members' needs. And shared emotional connection is created through sharing experiences and places together, as well as spending time together and having a joint history. This leadership style isn't hierarchical necessarily. Instead, it's based in volunteer action much of the time and is less about influencing others as it is creating social capital and acting as a symbolism for change. Grassroots leadership is especially helpful in contexts of crises. Though Bohm et al. Tend to focus more on crises that affect the entire community, regardless of socioeconomic status, such as war, the crisis of homelessness is still a reality in which many feel acutely, none more so, obviously, than those who are unhoused. The authors say that grassroots leadership is important in the development of solidarity and interest within a community and its members. Particularly in contexts of crises, grassroots leaders have the ability to assuage anxiety and panic, as well as inspire confidence in community members. In times of crisis, the authors note that community members may exhibit a variety of reactions to this stress, which can include rigidity, discomfort, feeling as if the social structure is being undermined, and outright refusal to be involved in helping in the crisis. Being involved with the crisis does demand a lot of effort and exceptional activity, but the authors assert that this is where leadership is likely to emerge. These leaders are considered transformational leaders, which are separate from transactional leaders. For context, transactional leaders are those who tend to value order and structure, focus on conforming to existing organizational structures, and measuring success based on organizational rewards and penalties. Grassroots leaders have the ability more so than, quote, transactional leaders to encourage people, in this case, community members, to rise above self interest and benefit, as well as inspire changes in people's values and beliefs, aspirations, and commitments to the communities in which they are members. When there is a crisis, there is a need for leaders to engage in participatory practices rather than exchange and practices. Furthermore, transformational leaders emphasize motivation and inspiration rather than reward and penalty. So, while it's easy to conceptualize grassroots leadership in communities at large, how does it look for libraries and other organizations? Bell makes some observations from their personal view about grassroots leadership in their organization, which is a higher education institution. They say that from what they've seen, individuals throughout higher education are taking point to create change rather than waiting for administration to do so. This includes academic libraries who take on problems and create solutions. One of these problems is textbook affordability, and rather than waiting for admin or publishing to do something about it, they instead tackle the problem themselves. These alternative textbook relief measures include supporting faculty to write open source books and allowing faculty to build curriculum materials out of items within the library itself, providing free or low cost alternatives to expensive textbooks. Librarians are enacting the changes they wish to see and do so without waiting for upper management. They're seeing a gap and filling it creatively to ensure that they serve their community of students in the best way possible. Boehm and Staples, in their study of grassroots leaders, said that many interviewers in their studies said something similar. They saw or experienced a gap and chose to bridge that gap. Furthermore, successful grassroots leaders saw a vision for their communities to work towards, as well as articulated the ethical and social significance of their group's activities. Finally, Beauregard also outlines the success of grassroots leadership within a community college setting. In the community college in which they studied, the institution put the needs of the community and students they served at the forefront of their work. In particular, one student success employee said the following: I've told everyone who will listen that it's all about making the students' experience the best possible no matter what we have to do to make that happen. It's not about what's my job and what's your job. We have to stop doing that. We are all on the same team and we are responsible for getting our students to succeed. It's about the actors within the organization working together towards a common and better goal, not just shoving responsibilities off on others and making students and patrons do more work. In regards to specific transformational leadership, which are again those who emphasize motivation and inspiration, the University of Saskatchewan's library also found that this approach was the best for buy in and motivating their staff that may have felt comfortable with the status quo. Sorensen and Sarjan Jenkins detailed this process in their case study. When faced with a shift to responsibility center management, RCM, the U of S library realized they needed to utilize grassroots style leadership to fully embrace the change. Rather than starting with a high level strategic plan that disseminated into further unit plans, the library instead decided to utilize thematic plans. These thematic plans were teaching and learning, research and support, and collections. Each plan had working groups that focused on researching and knowing trends regarding their plan, as well as outlining three outcomes that needed to be achieved within the 3 to 5 year window. Then, once those outcomes were approved, they were incorporated into the overall strategic plan of the library. For the University of Saskatchewan Library, this created a new role for librarians to shape to client needs, and this change was driven by these librarians themselves. Engaging everyone in the change process and showing strong communication skills through regular positive progress updates and building momentum and excitement about this change showed to be a rather successful in this project. This way of leadership and change action gave groups of librarians control of the change and ability to lead the change further and take ownership of it rather than putting it in the hands of one centralized hierarchical person or group. Though this particular case study talks about responsibility center management, which has to do with taking responsibility for revenue and expenditures, we think the core success of this study could be extrapolated to breaching the digital divide and the change from print resource focus to digital resource focus in libraries. This includes creating focus groups or departments that create plans for their focus and implement them into the overall strategic plan of the library, inspiring change amongst the organization and each other, and motivating one another, and allowing librarians to take ownership of the change rather than it being forced to accept it from a hierarchical person or group. So then, the overarching question now is how can libraries use grassroots leadership styles to breach the digital divide and unhoused or low income patrons? We can start here also by asking the question, is the digital divide a crisis? Well, it doesn't really seem like the digital divide would necessarily be considered a crisis given our discussion of grassroots leadership being particularly helpful in times of crisis, but access to technology and digital literacy plays an immense part in all of our lives. One of the main contributing factors to the crisis of homelessness in the United States is a lack of stable income, which therefore contributes to a lack of housing, which in turn creates an environment in which technology isn't easily accessible. And as we recall, technology is needed to access websites for job training and seeking, as well as government benefits and healthcare, and oftentimes housing as well. This is a clear gap in which libraries and librarians, as a community and grassroots leaders, are able to step in and fill. Many of us as community members know that libraries are synonymous with free Wi Fi and access to computers, though this wasn't always the case. And it does seem like this was where the shift in library culture began moving towards emphasizing providing technological and communication resources rather than print resources. Velasquez found that the advent of technology in public libraries changed the organizational culture of the libraries that were present in the study. Some of the libraries hired entirely new departments and positions centered around technology and technology use, including technology specialist roles, which is somebody who specializes in electronic resources. Other libraries had specific employees that monitored the public access computers and helped patrons with using them. One library director, in fact, said the following: people expect computers when they come into the library now, and they expect the library to offer online resources. These libraries also changed their beliefs with mission statements now reading things like providing accessible information and connecting patrons to a world of ideas, as well as one library director saying that PACs were a center for technological literacy. So, what does filling the gap look like? So while public libraries typically offer free Wi-Fi and access to computers, that shouldn't necessarily be where the gap filling stops. Libraries aren't open 24/7, nor is being provided with technology to use without any digital literacy skills very helpful. Anyone who's tried to work government websites for any reason knows just how frustrating that can be and how much digital literacy skills that requires. Furthermore, breaching the digital divide and offering more support for unhoused patrons to have access to job opportunities and trainings in conjunction with support resources, government or otherwise, will likely play a key role in helping in the crisis of homelessness. The obvious solution here would be to have public libraries offer programs and classes related to digital and information literacy, but those programs may not always be feasible for unhoused patrons to attend. So instead, Madison and Gersh say that one on one interaction is also a brilliant way for libraries to engage in information and digital literacy training. Patron interactions provide a perfect opportunity for information and digital literacy learning, and the librarians surveyed in this study indicated that they felt this absolutely was the case. Most interactions with patrons generally occur between 1 and 15 minutes, and many interactions were those related to computer usage and information retrieval. In these short interactions, micro-teaching was employed, which is the process of teaching short pieces of instruction in an anytime, any place sort of style of teaching. This study also said that micro-teaching digital and information literacy skills could be employed through well-placed and brief handouts, videos, and signage, which could be used to convey searching steps and how to quickly judge and communicate information. This could also be taken a step farther with brief step-by-steps of common technology-related questions. One thing to recall as well is Velasquez noting that several libraries in their study employed some form of technology specialist that would also sometimes serve as a point person for patrons to discuss technology issues and questions. Sometimes this would include entirely new departments focused solely on technology. One library that employs this function is Jackson County Library Services, which is located in Southern Oregon. The digital services employees here offer one-on-one appointments to help patrons with digital library services, computer issues, and software help. They also have a presence in all branches of the library system for drop-in computer help for those who are unable to make an appointment. And sometimes appointments can they can be barriers for some to access these resources. Another solution could be mobile technology. Hoseman et al. Detail the use of SolarSpell, which stands for Solar Powered Educational Learning Library. SolarSpell is a University of Arizona-led initiative which aims to overcome existing barriers to accessing high-quality, relevant educational content in resource-constrained regions lacking consistent, affordable access to the internet and electricity, and to build internet-ready skills such as information literacy. SolarSpell acts as a solar-powered internet hotspot that displays the library's content, and any Wi-Fi enabled device within range can access it and browse it. The content available is educational and open access, as well as localized to the area in which SolarSpell is being used. As of 2020, over 365 SolarSpell libraries have been utilized in 8 countries, mostly in the Pacific Islands and East Africa. SolarSpell has given implementers the ability to teach digital literacy skills in offline communities, and thus far has been really successful. Clearly, this solution fills a gap for global communities that don't have ready access to the internet or electricity, and I believe this type of solution could also apply to libraries seeking to serve and breach the digital divide in their unhoused patrons as well. Technology like SolarSpell makes outreach easy for public libraries to engage in unhoused campgrounds, shelters, and other community gathering places. One way this is currently being utilized as well is through Jackson County Library Services utilization of the DART van. The Direct Access to Resource and Technology, or DART van, has a set schedule in which it visits low-income housing complexes, food banks, shelters, and more to help give residents and clients of those organizations access to technology. It serves as a mobile hotspot as well, where anyone within a 300-foot radius of the van can access its Wi-Fi services. It also allows access to laptops and tablets for those utilizing the van. Those who are staffing the van are also available for help with job resources, homework help, voter registration, and more. This way, those who are unable to make it to the library are still able to access the wealth of information, teaching, and resources that the library has to offer. So, when a library or library system sees these gaps and chooses to close them with solutions such as these, it's important for librarians to also take ownership of these solutions. It shouldn't always fall on the tech departments. Librarians still have ample opportunities to give one-on-one digital literacy instruction, but should also give patrons the opportunity and ability to speak with technology specialists for further instruction if possible. It's also easy to showcase the mobile technology available and give out the schedule for it so that those who need it can seek it out. Again, it's not about what's my job and what's your job. Every employee in a library system employing these solutions is on the same team, and we are all responsible for helping our patrons succeed, learn, and thrive in our communities and society. Solving this problem is going to require both creative thinking and deep knowledge of the community that libraries and librarians serve, as well as working together with grassroots type groups within library organizations, excuse me. And these solutions are great first steps, we think, to closing the digital divide as well as teaching digital literacy skills and those patrons of ours that are in need. We want to thank you all for listening to us, and we hope you have a great day and learn something from us today. Thank you.